It all started, as these things so often do, with a piece of junk. A relic from a dead age that should have been landfill fodder 20 years ago. I found it at a Saturday morning garage sale. The kind where the dew is still wet on the grass, and the coffee the homeowners are sipping smells like salvation. It was resting in a dusty cardboard box full of other VHS tapes. Mostly Disney movies with clamshell cases, cracked and yellowed, and a few blockbuster hits recorded off the TV, complete with fuzzy ad breaks for cereal I hadn't thought about since I was a kid. This one was different. It was a plain black cassette with a single handwritten label stuck to the front. The label was the colour of old bone, and on it, in thick black marker, were 2 words. Play me. Just that. No title, no date, nothing. I'm a collector of sorts, not the serious kind with spreadsheets and archival plastic, but the kind who can't resist the pull of forgotten media. I like the grain of old film, the hiss of magnetic tape. It feels more real, somehow. More honest. I paid the guy $1 for it, and he gave me a look like I was doing him a favour, taking the cursed thing off his hands. Maybe I was. I didn't watch it right away. I let it sit on my media console for a few days, a small dark rectangle of mystery next to my sleek, modern Blu-ray player. It was a conversation piece for a conversation I never had. Finally, on a Tuesday night when the rain was lashing against my windows in a particularly biblical fashion, I decided to indulge my curiosity. I have an old VCR hooked up to my flat screen, a clunky, tank-like machine I keep just for these occasions. The tape slid into the slot with a satisfying thunk, and a mechanical groan that sounded like a sigh of relief. The screen flickered from blue to a blizzard of static. I adjusted the tracking, the white noise coalescing into a grainy, monochrome image. It was a room. A dark room, filmed from a stationary, low-quality camera. In the centre of the frame was a wooden chair, the kind you'd see in a school assembly hall, and someone was sitting in it. That was it. For a full 5 minutes, that's all I saw. The picture was terrible, washed out and shimmering with video noise. The figure was a dark shape against a slightly less dark background, perfectly still. I figured the tape was a dud. Maybe some art school project that was meant to be profound, but was just profoundly boring. My thumb was hovering over the eject button on the remote when the figure moved. It wasn't a big movement, just a slight tilt of the head, a jerky, unnatural motion, like a puppet on a string being handled by a novice. It was enough. I felt a cold prickle crawl up the back of my neck. I rewound the tape, the VCR protesting with a high-pitched whine, and played it again. This time, I was ready. I sat closer to the screen, my eyes tracing the indistinct outline of the person in the chair. They were wearing what looked like a suit, the shoulders slightly too wide, the fabric hanging loosely. The head tilt happened at exactly the 4:57 mark. I watched it again, and again. My initial boredom had curdled into a strange, obsessive fascination. Who was this person? Why were they just sitting there in the dark? On the 5th viewing, I noticed a face, or rather, the lack of one. The camera was grainy, yes, but not that grainy. As the figure tilted its head, the weak, ambient light caught the surface of its face. And there was nothing there. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. It was a smooth, pale, featureless ovoid, like an egg that someone had carelessly sanded down. It was a perfect, horrifying blank. I shot back from the screen, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. But the tape was a standard VHS. You couldn't just do that back then, not without a professional studio. This felt raw. It felt real. Against my better judgment, I kept the tape in. Sleep was out of the question now. The rain hammered on, and the only sound in my apartment was the low hum of the VCR and the faint, almost subliminal hiss from the TV speakers. I became a video detective. My case a single, terrifying piece of footage. I started to look past the figure, trying to piece together the environment. The walls were dark, but I could make out a large rectangular water stain near the ceiling. To the left of the chair, there was what looked like a stage, just the edge of it visible in frame. High up on the right wall, a tall, arched window allowed a sliver of faint light to pierce the gloom, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was the window that did it. The specific shape of the arch. The way it divided the glass into a pattern I'd spent countless hours staring at, while trying to avoid the gaze of a particularly fearsome math teacher. My blood ran cold. I knew that room. It was the assembly hall of St. Jude's Primary School. My primary school. The place hadn't been a school in 20 years. It was shut down due to budget cuts and asbestos, left to rot on the edge of town like a beached whale. I ejected the tape, my hands trembling. The label, "Play Me," seemed to mock me. It was no longer an invitation. It was a command, a dare. For 2 days, I tried to forget about it. I went to work, I ate, I talked to people. But the image of the faceless thing in the chair was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. The memory of the school hall, a place of innocent childhood boredom, was now tainted, twisted into something monstrous. The questions chewed at me. Who made this tape? When? And why, for the love of God, did it show that? Curiosity is a powerful, stupid engine. It can drive a man to do things that his survival instinct screams at him to avoid. On Thursday night, I found myself in my car, parked across the street from the skeletal remains of St. Jude's. The building was a wreck. The chain-link fence surrounding it was rusted through in places and peeled back like a sardine can lid. The windows were a mixture of splintered boards and shattered glass. Dark, gaping mouths in the brick facade. Graffiti, profane and colourful, covered the walls. It looked less like a place of learning and more like a tomb. I told myself I was just going to look. Just confirm that the hall looked like the one on the tape, and then I'd go home, throw the damn thing in an incinerator, and see a therapist. Armed with a heavy-duty flashlight and a crowbar I'd brought from home, I slipped through the fence. The air inside the school was thick with the smell of damp. My flashlight beam cut a nervous path through the darkness, illuminating overturned desks, scattered textbooks with their pages swollen and warped, and a fine layer of dust and plaster that covered everything like a grey shroud. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet, every rustle of wind through the broken windows, sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through me. I walked down the main corridor, my footsteps echoing all around me in the empty hallways. My old classroom, year 4, was on the left. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and shone my light inside. The cheerful drawings of animals I remembered were gone, replaced by peeling paint and the dark, spidery cracks of neglect. For a moment, I was a 9-year-old boy again, terrified of being caught out of bounds. At the end of the corridor were the double doors to the assembly hall. They were heavy oak, and someone had wrapped a thick, rusty chain around the handles, securing it with a padlock that looked as old as the school itself. This was it. This was my chance to turn back, go home, forget everything. But I couldn't. I had to know. I wedged the crowbar between the doors and put my weight into it. The wood groaned in protest. The chain strained. With a screech of tortured metal and a crack of splintering wood, the lock gave way. The doors swung inward into a vast, cavernous darkness. The air that rolled out was colder than the rest of the school, carrying a scent that was different from the simple mustiness of decay. It was a dead, sterile smell. The smell of a place where nothing had lived for a very long time. I stepped inside, looking all around me with my flashlight. And there it was, exactly as it was on the tape. The high, arched windows on the right, their glass now milky with grime. The dark water stains blooming across the ceiling. The low stage on the left, its curtain long since rotted away. And, in the centre of the vast, empty floor, sat a single wooden chair. I struggled to catch my breath as I tried to come to terms with what I was seeing. It was real. It was all real. I walked towards the chair, my boots crunching on fallen plaster. I was in the video. I was standing on the set. My light played over the chair. It was empty. Of course it was empty. What had I expected? A sense of profound relief washed over me. So potent, it almost made my knees buckle. It was just the chair. Just a room. The tape was a sick prank, a hoax. Maybe some local kids with a creepy mask had filmed it years ago. That had to be it. I laughed. A short, sharp bark of a sound that was immediately swallowed by the hall's suffocating acoustics. I turned to leave, feeling foolish and spooked. I realigned the beam of my flashlight to try and find the exit sign. And it stopped. It stopped on a pair of scuffed, black shoes, standing in the deep shadows by the far wall, just beyond the reach of the moonlight. My light travelled upwards, past the cuffs of a pair of loose-fitting trousers, over the buttons of a cheap, dark suit jacket. My eyes widened. My flashlight beam, shaking violently now, climbed higher, past the collar of a white shirt. It illuminated the head. It was smooth. It was pale. It was a perfect, featureless ovoid. It wasn't a mask. I could see the subtle texture of skin, the faint pulse of a vein just beneath the surface at the temple. It was a living, breathing thing that had no business existing. For a moment that stretched into a cold eternity, we were both frozen. Me, pinned in the centre of the room, a deer in the headlights of my own making, and it, a silent sentinel of impossible anatomy, standing in the shadows. Then, it moved. It took a step forward. An uncanny and inhuman shuffle, exactly like the movement on the tape. One foot dragging slightly behind the other. It raised a hand, the fingers long and pale, and beckoned. Not to me. It was pointing at the chair. It took another step. And another. It was coming for me. A silent, faceless thing in a dead school. A thing that shouldn't be. A thing that I'd invited into my life for the price of $1. The label on the tape flashed in my mind. Why did I have to play that stupid tape? Play me. I had played it. And now, the performance was about to begin. I opened my mouth to scream, but the only sound that came out was the frantic, useless hiss of my own breath. The thing kept coming. Its blank face a canvas onto which my terror painted the most hideous expressions imaginable. It was 10 feet away, then 8, then 6. My flashlight fell from my nerveless fingers, clattering onto the floor and plunging the room into near total darkness. The beam now pointed uselessly at the ceiling, illuminating one of the large, dark water stains. It looked, for all the world, like a screaming face. And in the sudden blackness, I heard a sound for the very first time. A soft, wet, tearing noise coming from the direction of the thing. The sound of skin splitting. The sound of a mouth being made.